When last we left our adventurers, they had screwed up everything completely forever. Now back to the show. So, the party ended up traveling to Collier. Now, there's several reasons why they wanted to go to Collier, but mostly they wanted to check up on a few things. Zeriel actually had a bit of a ulterior motive with doing so, because she wanted to check up on her sister. Now, Zeriel has kept news and thought and information about her sister extremely quiet over the years, and when she got there, she did in fact find her sister had actually married a young drudge gentleman, and the two were quite happily married. They can't have children, obviously, but they're still quite happily married. And, there was a bit of a family reunion kind of a thing, except not really, because Zeriel didn't actually reveal who she was, just that she was some elf who happened to be visiting. Shortly thereafter, one of the next things that happened was that they went to look up on. Ah, dang it. I was trying to remember how to pronounce it, or how to say it without looking up. I've got my list right here. Tarsella of Firetree. That's her name. Now I know what you're thinking. Who the hell's Tarsella of Firetree? Well, Tarsella of Firetree is a young troll woman that the party has encountered before. You see, they had gotten to the town of Karath. This was quite a while ago, back before the live campaign even started. And they had, over a bit of... They started picking up on little clues and hints and started to think, hang on, something's going on here. So they decided to investigate, like good adventurers do. And as they investigated and pursued the matter, they slowly started to uncover this horrible conspiracy that was running throughout the town. And it was this big build-up to, oh my god, it's some horrible, dangerous thing. It turns out what had happened is the mayor of the town, a Mr. Forth of Seaspear, and a troll gentleman, Seaspear's actually not troll. No, Seaspear's troll. I'm right. A troll gentleman who he was in all but name married, so his beloved, and he had conceived a daughter whose name was Eliarchia of Seaspear, and she was born a desolate. Now, I was particularly proud of this particular development because it was probably one of the first times that desolation actually came into the foreground and got the spotlight in the campaign. And on top of this, it was a great turnaround. It's probably one of my best twists I think I've done in the campaign so far, that they were going through this whole thing and there was all these signs and they were getting building and building towards something more and more, and then they find out, oh, they're just hiding their desolate daughter. I was actually a bit disappointed in the time because all of them made their will saves. This meant that none of them were going to be trying to murder the child right in front of her grieving parents, which is a bit of a shame. I know that sounds horrible, but think of the story dramatic potential. The party, the heroes, go and uncover this conspiracy and then murder a 1-year-old child. Anyways, regardless of that, they ended up using their funds and contacts and all other sorts of things in order to try and get these people to escape to the city of Collier. Now, Collier, of course, is the city of the Drudges. There's a few other races that live there, of course, but it is the Drudge city-state. I can't even call it a city, more like a connecting ring of cities. Kind of like how cities are viewed in real life. If you live in L.A., well, L.A. itself is actually like this, but the L.A. area is like this. So all of this is considered L.A. So that's kind of what Collier is. All of this is Collier, even though the actual Collier town is like this in the middle. Excuse me. So they end up in Collier, sending them there because the Drudges are notoriously resistant to desolation and the effects thereof, alongside a few other races, including the Olthoi, some humans, and mites. Now, so they check up on them, and they're like, hey, what's up? And she's doing well. In fact, she's really grateful because this young gentleman has been helping her and her daughter out and getting settled and making sure they can make ends meet. He's a fisherman by the name of Andre of Whisperwind. Now, once again, that name probably means nothing to you. Andre was the young boy that the party rescued from the Nightmare of Pinnacle, again, some time ago. And he was a desolate that they had found and rescued, and were like, oh my god, and they got him away, and they sent him. Actually, what actually happened is Zeriel privately arranged for the 11. I bet you don't even know who they are. I'm not even going to go into that. She privately arranged for the 11 to teleport Andre to Collier to get him to safety. And what she found out many, many weeks later was that as a result of that action, the Sotiris that had been sent to teleport him had been destroyed, which was pretty big news. So here's Andre, except all of a sudden he's 20-something instead of, like 10. And they're really confused by that. But he's like, Snarg, hey, Guido. He's like, I recognize all of you. Aziriel, what's up? I recognize every one of you. What's going on, guys? And he's very jovial, very happy. He's like, he invites them to go out on a fishing trip with them. Guido immediately takes to him. He's like, this guy is awesome. I like this guy, that kind of a thing. And so they go off and they do their fishing trip, and they're having fun out fishing. Zariel starts doing some stuff, behind the scenes, trying to set up for what's happening here. And what ends up happening is Zariel is terrified, rightfully so. So she goes and gets her sister and her brother-in-law, basically, at this point, and translates them directly to the maiden's deceit in order to get them to safety. She then has a long talk with her sister about a lot of things. I'm not going to go over all the details with it. It was pretty good stuff. The most important part of it, though, is the fact that in the middle of the discussion, her sister mentioned that their grandmother had been visiting regularly. Now, their grandmother's dead. So Zariel's like, huh? And immediately tries to think if she's lying to her. But as far as her sister is concerned, she is not lying. As far as her sister is concerned, it is in fact her grandmother, and she's been visiting fairly regularly, like weekly, almost, if not monthly monthly at the outside. And she has been, making sure to get money and food and supplies and just visiting. She bakes, that kind of a thing. And it's been nice having her there and present. She's been mum on what she actually does for a living, but her sister hasn't been the prying sort. Now, the shortly thereafter, so while this is happening, Snarg and Guido and Andre, who are out on the boat, decide to come rip-roaring back. So Snarg actually uses his geomancy powers to basically have the water shoving the boat along. And then Guido, in an effort to stop the boat, basically puts a portal in front of the boat, which will exit in the hut where Andre and where, oh god, I can't think of her name all of a sudden, Tarcella lives. So as you might imagine, the boat comes crashing through the portal, smashes through the wall, devastates half the hut. The party can't go anywhere without destroying property. Have you noticed that? And smashes through the hut. Big sign. Now here's the thing. For those of you not aware, there is a bit of a problem with Guido's teleportation. He's finally mastered it to the point where he can use it regularly without issue. And Guido thinks that's a great thing. Guido, the character, is not aware of the side effect of his teleport. Because what's happening is anytime you go through one of Guido's portals, or are teleported by Guido, you are being ricocheted through the black star out to your destination, like this, instead of going straight to it. Make sense? So he has to roll a d20, and I have a few rules that are kind of vague as to what exactly happens as a result of that. So he rolls a d20 to see what happens to Snarg as a result of going through the portal, and a 1 is rolled. So Snarg comes out as a mass of green flame, and as a result is just kind of consuming the entire hut in his chaotic fire. Now, the funny thing is, from Snarg's perspective, everything's totally normal. Right about this point in time, Zariel teleports in, desperately trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And this is about when Andre insists that Zariel is the enemy, having done all this horrible damage and whatnot, and pretty much puts Guido towards fighting her. And the session ended on the promise of basically a three-way battle between Snarg, Guido, and Zariel. So the next session starts, and we all roll initiative. It's how the session starts. Roll initiative, and the battle begins. Snarg goes first. Now, Snarg, from his perception, everything's totally normal. But everything he does, every action he takes, will have an effect not quite what he wanted, and it will not necessarily target who he wanted to target. So I decide based on dice rolls who he targets and what actually happens. So he decides to do a massive damaging attack on one individual. In this case, the monster, which is actually Zariel. But he doesn't actually target Zariel. He targets Andre. Now, he one-shots Andre. He actually puts everything into this full power attack, the pounce feat, lunge attack, all that fun stuff, leaping strike, everything. He puts everything into it, hits him for like 100 something, just gone. So that's the end of the first phase of the boss fight. I was really hoping to have a little more PvP action going on before that happened, because as soon as Andre goes down, the mental influence that was over Guido vanishes. Now, the bits of Andre, which have been glooping around, are still there. The party takes a moment to try and recoup. Zeriel's like, what the hell's going on? Guido re-teleports Snarg back through the portal to reconstitute him, which actually does work. And they're like, okay, we're good, everything's fine. And of course they have to evacuate the troll and her daughter. But shortly thereafter, the bits of Andre have kind of slowly reformed and slowly muck up into this massive water golem with lightning coursing through it. Now, of course, some of you are just like, oh, whoop-de-crap. Golems are something I try to use as rare as possible, not just because they are a very rare aspect of the setting, but because a single golem of even the weakest type is so strong as to be capable of taking out a town without much effort. And that's the weakest type of golem. So any golem fight is supposed to be a major event. So this hybrid water lightning golem, which is also supposed to be impossible, by the way, attacks the group, and they have this big boss fight, smash it down, and they start trying to defeat its pieces as it kind of splashes out and creates new amalgams of itself. And, of course, Snarg finally casts a buff spell. I think this might be the first buff that's been cast in the history of the campaign, at least in the live campaign, which is null air. Basically, they can't take air damage for the next, 6 rounds or something like that. So half of the damage that the water air golem is doing is suddenly nullified. Pretty smart, actually. It takes them a while to kill this thing, but in the middle of the battle, there are shots coming in. Sniper shots that are assisting in the combat, coming from way over there, and from on top of one of the nearby roofs. Roofs? And those shots, help take it out, and Zeriel ends up, being like, what the hell? And it turns out it's this young mite woman. She's not actually that young. She's like in her 30s. But it's a very famous mite woman. Her name is Abilene. Of course, she has no clan name because she's a mite. Now, of course, you're thinking, who the hell is Abilene? Abilene, I say she's somewhat famous because she is one of the original freelancers. Yeah, I know. Now you're thinking, what the hell are the freelancers? So when Magitech was first invented, there was an idea to make a sort of a Magitech weapon, and these are actually called lancers. And they function in many ways like a gun, just a Magitech gun. And the overall rule for the setting, in case you're not aware, is if magic is here and tech is here, then Magitech is up here. Magitech is always going to be stronger in general than something of equivalent power of magic or tech. Makes sense? As long as it's well built, of course. But Magitech is also the most difficult thing to construct and the most difficult thing to use, since it actually requires knowledge of the technology and the soul power, for lack of a better term, the will, if you will, to actually activate it simultaneously. So it's very, very tasking. And the number of freelancers that exist in the world, which is the name of the prestige class of people who can actually wield lancers, which are the Magitech weapons, is very small. There can't be more than 30 in the entire continent. So, in general, you could probably spot a freelancer on site. They've actually only ever seen one other freelancer prior to this, and she's still out there, actually, but we won't get into that. So Abilene is one of the original freelancers, one of the ones who actually was, a prototype. I want to be at the cutting edge of trying out this new technology, this new magic. She is actually a member of the Order. Now, she has been sent here specifically and privily to try and do a few other things, completely unrelated. She basically happened to be nearby, saw this giant water golem thing attacking them, and jumped in to help. And she received orders from the Order to assist the party, because that's Snarg and that's Guido, and the Order is very interested in making sure that they have proper support. In other words, Abilene herself is a very powerful, very skilled individual. She's high level, too, being one of the original freelancers. And the Order wants to make sure that that the party has a connection to them in order to provide them the backing resources. Now, if you're paying attention, you'll notice that one of the major themes of this chapter of Primus has been that the party are very personally powerful, but very weak politically. They don't have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of resources and whatnot. And the party's been going out of their way to try and fix that, right? Hang on just a second. So, they've done a lot of things. Guido's got his company going. Snarg has got his mercenary corps going, his PMC going. There's also the alliance with the Dominion that's been happening, and a few other things that's happened even before that. The party has actively been trying to become active in the political game, so they have resources in addition to just power. This is the Order reaching out and saying, hey, maybe we could help you out too, just a thought. So Abilene joins the party. A little bit of out-of-character perspective. My dear beloved sister had decided that Zariel no longer served a real function in the party because the way she had designed the character, it just made too much sense for her not to be a party member. And I have one big rule. One massive underlying, you can't violate this rule when it comes to D&D. It's the only thing I would call an unviable rule, and that is you can't leave the party, basically. You have to be a part of the party. Well, if you've noticed, that rule has been kind of bent a little bit because the party keeps splitting constantly. And it's been something that the players have noticed, and something I've noticed. And a lot of that has been because of the fact that, while Guido and Snarg are at least tangentially on the same track, although Zariel, again, by nature of her character, has been kind of designed more for solo adventures. So Sis decided to go ahead and take Zariel and pull her out of the party, and we created Abilene to replace her. So Abilene is her new character. A young mite woman who is a member of the Order, basks in the adulation of others, and she has some other little niggles and flaws to her, good and bad. You'll see a bit of her, or have seen a bit of her, I guess is more accurate. So having gotten Abilene in the party, they basically decide, they leave a message for Zariel, like, hey, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, and they take off. Zariel takes the hint, basically, and goes off to do her own thing for a bit, which also involves the Forum campaign. I'm not going to discuss that here. I'm actually going to discuss that in a separate story thus far. Probably the next one, actually. I want the Forum campaigns, plural, to progress a little bit more before I do an update on what's happening with them. So, all of this having happened, the party, which now consists of Guido, Snarg, and Abilene, decides to go ahead and head forward towards Eldritch, because they got a few samples from this water-air golem thing that was actually also a person who was impersonating someone they knew. Carry the one. Yeah. And they want to take this to Eldritch, and she is actually under orders to take this and the information to Eldritch pronto, as soon as possible. So next thing that happens, looks like actually there's only these sessions were kind of combat heavy, and so I don't actually have that much to share with you. Just one more thing, basically. So they went to the Walta Temple on the way there, because it was on the way there, and Abilene was really excited to go. She's never actually performed one of the trials before. I described the Water Temple for them, and I will try to describe it for you. I will fail, but I will try. The Water Temple, as with all temples, there's a big town that's just kind of around the temple that is built up over the centuries of the temple being there. And the thing is, for those of you not aware, every temple exudes what I call a peace field. You can't even intend to harm other people while you're in the field. Some of the party members actually ran up against this when they very first encountered a peace field. They're like, oh, I want to do this, or I want to hurt this, or I want to yell at this person, and they literally couldn't, because the field was affected to the point where they didn't want to, so that even the desire to hurt someone didn't exist. Make sense? As you might imagine, this makes a temple that happens to be pretty close to the front lines of the war right now between the Neveri and the Alluvians. There's a lot of refugees that are here. In fact, there are so many refugees and so many tents from both Neveri, Alluvia, and Stonehold. It's basically at the confluence of these three locations that they kind of sort of have too many people, and there are people in the city area, in the tents and in the refugee camps, that actually extend outside the peace field. So we have a weird situation now where there's all sorts of people who can't hurt each other, who can't even want to hurt each other, and yet if they go just a little bit too far out, they're amongst a group of people who are desperate, afraid, lonely, scared, starving, hungry, diseased, dying, and of course, have no peace field. So there is a bit of a mess going on here right now. The Order is here in force. Lots and lots of members of the Order are present. So much so, in fact, that almost no one is actually attending the temple itself. When the party goes to the temple, there's maybe 5 members of the order in the temple at all, as opposed to the usual several hundred, because they're all trying to distribute resources, take care of the sick, help people, rotate people, and just trying to fix the many, many problems of the township of the water temple. So they go into the water temple. The water temple, there's a lake. That's actually not quite accurate, but there's a body of water that is a whirlpool that goes up instead of down, and it reaches its peak right around here, at which point, well, above that, suspended in the air, are these cylinders, flat top, flat bottom cylinders of water. There's like one here, and there's one here, and there's several of them, and they form a pattern which I will not describe to you. It is significant, but nobody in setting has any context to understand what it means at the moment. But there is a specific pattern that these pillars meet, and at the very top are 3 spheres which orbit each other. 3 blazing red spheres. They look like little miniature suns rotating in one of the globs of water towards the top. And so you hop into the water, and it kind of carries you up. And then, of course, you just have to, like, will it mentally. I want to go there. Whoosh. And then you jump out, and you're literally launched through the air to the next pot of water, and then the next spot of water, and so forth and so on. Quite a ways into the air. You'll notice a lot of the temples go up quite a bit. But that is, of course, because some of the ley lines are actually up rather than in. So the party goes through all these things. It takes them a while to figure out how to get up exactly, but they finally make their way to the top, and they're there at the trials. I decided to truncate the trials just because trials can go on a really long time. As much as I like that, for the sake of the show, I kind of chopped them off a little bit rather than going into full depth to what I would have actually liked to do. Snarg, wait, did Snarg go first, or did Abilene? I can't remember, but Abilene, I remember Abilene's quite distinctly, because she went through, and her trial was set several years in the future. A quick refresher, for those of you who don't remember. While you are in a trial, you are not aware that you are in a trial, and therefore you can't game the system. You don't know that you're being judged, and you don't know that you're... Basically, you feel like whatever's happening is actually happening. And the trial builds itself around you, your memories, your perceptions. So whatever it shows you is not necessarily true. In fact, it is most likely false, because it is a reflection of your own self. And it's usually set sometime in the future of now, and you will have retroactive memories from the years that have passed and all the events thereof in order to accommodate the fact that you are now 3 years in the future. So Abilene's was that she was set several years into a war-torn future in which the war had been ravaging half the landscape, really, and just absolutely dominating everything, and everyone hated her personally. She was actually considered a war criminal for basically being the one person who could have saved the war. She was actually involved in a mission to get several diplomats and delegates together in order to have peace talks and end the war. What ended up happening is all of them died, the war got worse, and everyone blamed her for it because they thought she actually sabotaged the peace talks. So she's been quite literally living off of garbage and in alleyways. She's actually in Collier when this happens. And she comes across a elven gentleman and a drudge, and the elf in particular question recognizes her on sight and is vitriolic towards her, tries to kill her. Nothing she has works. Like all of her special abilities for being a freelancer, because, Magitech, so it's magical in addition to... So none of her abilities work. And she's trying to figure out what to do, and she finally manages to make a way to interact with this guy, and she ends up having to kill him in the end. Now, he also reveals through the course of their dialogue that he had family and a wife who actually lived in Rithwick, which was where those peace talks had been held when everything went bad. Rithwick doesn't exist anymore. As a result of the attack on the diplomats, Rithwick was just scorched earth. Nobody survived. So he's really upset about that. She nevertheless continues to strive on. Gets out of the trial. Success. Woo. Snarg's turn. And again, that feels a little truncated because it is. It did still take like half an hour. Snarg's turn. Snarg gets up. And he is also set in the future of a war-torn setting. It's almost like war is on the minds of these characters. And in this one, the war has been just wrecking the whole continent. And everyone's been turned into degenerates. Snarg himself is actually a very skilled member of... or I shouldn't say member, excuse me. It's a very skilled individual who was used to bypassing patrols and stealing from them. And he's actually trying to rescue several captured gnolls amongst Illuvian camps. What he learns as he goes in there is that the gnolls have willingly joined the Illuvians, that they not only are willing participants in the atrocities of the war, but they kind of like it. That they actually enjoy having an outlet for their aggressions and having an outlet for their skills and use for their skills for that matter. They're well paid, they're taken care of, and they can keep fighting alongside everyone else. In fact, the gnoll that Snarg goes to rescue from the Illuvians tries to recruit Snarg into the Illuvian army. Now, as you might imagine, Snarg says no, and goes and basically puts forth a plan in order to assassinate a local general, or a colonel, I think, actually, in order to try and stymie the Illuvian efforts in the area. Some things go back and forth. He decides what he's going to do and what he's going to say. He finally ends up starting himself to the colonel, and there's this whole big diplomatic talk thing, and then he comes out of the trial successful. I'm skipping over a lot of really awesome role-playing details, by the way, so forgive me. This is a story thus far, not a point-by-point. You can watch the actual live campaign if you want that. Then Guido goes in. So Guido goes in, and the trial commences without him there. Like, Guido is basically like having a sky's eye view of the trial, of the events, and he could see down there, and he could see bits and pieces, and his memory is partially altered, like it should be, in order to adjust to the trial, but partially not. He's aware that he's in a trial, which is really wrong, and he's aware that he's watching the trial, which is really wrong. And as he's watching, the trial itself starts to rend until the very earth beneath him starts to grow these violet cracks in it. And as these cracks grow and the energy starts to pour out of them, everything just kind of goes into a blazing white. And then the water temple is destroyed. Let me say that again. Every single one of these temples has been around since before year zero, since as long as anyone is aware of or cognizant of. Nobody is certain who exactly built them or why, but people have been attending these temples for 349 years at least. And the water temple just ceases to exist. The water that's in the sky goes away. It evaporates. The three suns explode. The whirlpool at the bottom dissipates into just a lake, and the water splashes out onto the nearby city. And the peace field goes away. The party scrambles to survive plummeting half a mile from the air. It's not quite half a mile, but it's quite a height up. They're way up there, and they succeed. Of course, they're the party. They have resources at their behest. Everyone starts to freak out. A riot breaks out, just like that. Within seconds, there is screaming, yelling. Of course, everyone can see the water temple for miles around, given how tall it is, so they all see the destruction of the water temple. And the peace field going down is probably noticeable to everyone, since all of a sudden they can and will harm each other. The riot quickly turns into a complete massacre. The Order are trying desperately to contain things. The party actually runs to an airship that they borrowed. Not a military-grade airship, it's actually a merchant ship from Zelios Drive Yards that they basically borrowed by turning in a favor with the Dominion, because they need to get to Eldritch. So they turn in this favor, they get to the airship, like, ugh! They actually have to fight their way into the airship, and then do a fighting retreat into the airship because people are just swarming this thing. It is absolute chaos. Thousands of people are dying and being looted, and being just all sorts of horrible, terrible things are happening here. And I think that's a good time to cut it off. So I'll see you next time, guys.